2023 Chevy Colorado. This one could potentially be a nightmare. We've got a dead cluster, dead radio. Obviously the engine still starts. You can see the green light. We're readied up. Funny thing is just a few minutes ago it was working fine. So I don't really know what changed other than I walked away from the truck and came back to it, and all of a sudden it's acting up like this. Anyways, yeah, this is all working. I can press and hold. I can get it to enter service mode. The little light just came on service mode. But this is all I've got. So yeah, it'll enter key on engine off service mode, so I can at least check codes, or at least attempt to check codes. We will see which modules respond and which ones don't. Well, this is what we've got for codes. U164E, and a lot of modules regarding lost communication with radio on CAN bus 5. So I guess what I should do is take a look at the wiring schematic for CAN bus 5. Well, this diagram's kind of a mess because I had to sit down and figure out which options codes I do and I do not have. So we've got break-offs here, here, and here for depending on what options we have. But I've crossed out what we don't have and I've highlighted what we do need to worry about. So everybody, this is the schematic for CAN bus 5. We've got the radio, the HVAC interface, the serial data gateway module, wireless accessory charging module, the TSIM, otherwise known as the OnStar module, and the audio amplifier. So we've got basically everybody pointing the finger saying, I can't talk to the radio. And because this is essentially a closed system, there is no connection to this network from the OBD2 data link connector. I cannot do any external testing without actually accessing any of these modules. So the audio amplifier and the OnStar module are behind the back seat and require a fair amount of disassembly. The serial data gateway module is underneath the dash, requires some disassembly. The radio is underneath the dash on the right side, and that one doesn't look too bad to get to. The HVAC controls, that one would be pretty easy to get to. This one would be not terrible, but this one are probably the easiest ones to get to do our test, but still require some disassembly. The easiest possible way to diagnose this would be to go to X300, disconnect X300, and then test. You would test this direction. We should expect to see about 120 ohms, and we should expect to see about 120 ohms this direction. If we tested across the two circuits with everything connected, we should expect to see 60 ohms, and the reason for that is because of Ohm's law. That may be a different video, whatever, the information's out there. But that's kind of an instant diagnostic test that tells us what's going on in this network. If I find that I get 60 ohms across these two when everything's connected, then I know that I don't need to look at anything on this diagram because that's not the problem. If that's the case, I would go to the radio directly and check powers and grounds, etc. So I may end up needing to access the radio anyway, but for the time being, just to get our bearings and just to decide what we're actually going to do, X300 is going to be the easiest possible place. So a day or two later, I got busy. Good thing it's still broken. Okay, so X300 is down here in the kick panel area. It's a black connector, so there's a gray one and a black one. We're after this one. I'm going to split this one in half, or maybe first I'll test across it in parallel while it's still connected, and we'll see if we get our 60 ohms or if we get something else. I was literally just talking to the customer about the problem, and he said he's never even experienced the dead screen problem. As you can see, we have a normal reading of 60 ohms. The meter was going crazy because he just opened and closed the door, so I think we were seeing some network activity. At this point, seeing a normal reading, let me see if I can actually show you where I'm tapped in. I'm on the blue and yellow and blue and white wire. Terminal terminal 7 and 8, is that what this says? Terminal 7 and 8 on X300. We've got a normal reading. So at this point, what I think I might do is install the lab scope and see what the network signals are looking like, because we may have a shorted network or just possibly a faulty radio software, because I think it was only the radio that was reporting it had a communication fault, or everybody was pointing their finger at the radio, or I don't know. It was a couple days ago that I looked at this vehicle now, so I think I need to regain my bearings on what I was doing. The customer literally walked up on me when I was about to do that ohms test, the resistance test, and I told him, because he was asking me, he's like, well, how long do you think to get this truck back? I said, well, that depends on what I find when I do this test. I told him, if I find a normal resistance reading, that suggests that the wiring and the circuitry is all okay, and we may have a faulty module. So at this point, what I've done is I've tapped in my lab scope here, and we're looking at the voltages on those circuits. Let me grab my diagram. We are on these two circuits and we're monitoring the voltage, network activity. So when I first took this up, it looked like it was floating at about 1 volt maybe, and that's kind of abnormal, but now we're at 0. I just stepped on the brake pedal and things are coming alive now. Let me go ahead and pause this, or let me start it up just to make sure that we are actually in our failed state. Okay, so I started it up. We're in our failed state. This is what the network is doing. I just recently upgraded to Pico 7. How do I pause it? Do I just press the space bar? Yeah, that still works. Just pick a spot. Okay. So it looks like we're somewhat in the normal range. So do we have something else going on here? I don't know. I don't like how low this is going, because we should be more like, let me see. Can I use a cursor? So we are going down to about 1.371, and on the other side we're going up to about 3.66. So we might be just a little bit off from the voltage ranges that we should be, and that may be why we're having a network fault, especially if you look right here. You can see these dips right here. They seem to be proportionate on the other side. So I wonder if we may have some sort of wiring fault going on, or some sort of module corrupting the line, corrupting the data stream. How about this spot right here? We've got something that is communicating way outside of the normal voltage range, and what is that? What's that nasty spot right here? Got something going on. It kind of looks like we've got a faulty module corrupting the data stream, and that would kind of coincide with the fact that we have codes set for only one module not communicating, I think. Let me go back and check codes again. So yes, everybody's pointing their fingers at the radio. They're saying, I can't talk to the radio. We know that the circuit test, the ohms at least, resistance test is normal, so that suggests that we may have a module that's causing this, pulling things out of their normal voltage range, and things just are not able to communicate. They can't understand the message. So we know the radio is not communicating, but why would this part be dead also? Is that related? I'm a little confused now. Upon further research, yes, the cluster is just a slave device to the radio. So if the radio's down, the cluster will also be down. So I think we're getting a little closer. I'm starting to think we have a faulty radio. At this point, we know the radio's down here underneath. So I think we need to go down straight to the radio and do some circuit tests there. Well, I had to remove a panel to get down here. Access is still really terrible. That's the radio right there. The connector I need to get to is back there behind all these harnesses. So this is going to be a little bit of a challenge to get under here and do this testing. I'm going to test the radio powers and grounds and verify the communication circuits are okay, which we already kind of know they are. And probably just going to end up throwing a radio at this because it's looking like a logic locked condition. Maybe I could bypass the radio, but I mean, it seems that all the other modules on the network are successfully able to report codes, right? Because when we communicate with the scan tool, where's my schematic? Let me grab my schematic. So when we communicate with the scan tool, we're actually going through the serial data gateway module because these modules that are reporting all the codes do not directly communicate to the scan tool. So the fact that these guys are all successfully able to report codes suggests that the network is actually okay, despite what we saw there. You know, we did see some abnormal voltage spikes, but like I said, that could just be a faulty module, such as the radio, because everyone's pointing their fingers at the radio. Hey, it's the radio. You know what? I just found this bulletin that describes exactly what we have going on. IPC and radio blank. Possible cause, logic lockup due to low voltage or a failed update. So perhaps what I need to do is follow the direction in this bulletin and see if it pertains to what will be going on. And it's looking like this is related. So what's funny to me is that this bulletin does not show up when you search that trouble code. So maybe I'll submit some feedback to them and say, you should add this trouble code to this bulletin so then it'll show up on search. The only reason I found this is because I was searching for the radio. I just did a keyword search for radio and this one popped up. So would have been nice if it was linked to that code earlier, because I would have just immediately found this. Step 1, they say disconnect the battery and fully charge and reconnect. So I did actually already disconnect the battery twice for this and it didn't make any difference. So at that point, that's where I decided, well, I need to dive in and actually diagnose it. But apparently they say it should be disconnected for a minimum of 15 minutes. So I'll have to do that. I think I left it disconnected for 15 minutes or more and it didn't make any difference. So I don't know what to say. But I think I'm going to follow the directions on this bulletin and see where that gets me. So I guess I'll do exactly what they say. We do have some sort of aftermarket wiring tapped in. I don't know what it's for. I don't necessarily know that it's related yet because we have not fully diagnosed this vehicle. I've powered everything down. I'm going to disconnect the battery now and put it on a charger for at least 15 minutes. This is an example of diagnosing a gateway isolated network, by the way, CAN network. Not too much different than diagnosing a normal CAN network, other than the fact that we don't have access to the wiring via the DLC, so we cannot quickly and easily do the ohms test. We actually have to come up with a plan like I did earlier. I said, well, the easiest spot to get to would be X300 to take that measurement. And I did. So I'm glad that was the first thing I did, because it put me on the right track. It told me, well, it's not wiring, it's not a connection, it's something else. Well, it's been closer to an hour now. Okay, let me tighten that up and we'll see if that made any difference on our radio and cluster display. Yep, torque to spec, death grip type plus quarter turn. Well, like I said, I already tried Like I said, I already tried to disconnect the battery twice now. This will be number 3 attempt, and it's looking like that bulletin may not apply for us, so I may still need to get back down there and test the radio circuits. Anyway, to me it's looking like a faulty radio. I don't know what else to say. They load these cars with fancy, super expensive technology, and then things break like this, and it's like, wow, I've got no speedometer, no cluster, nothing, because the radio can't communicate. So I also have this network communication status function in the scan tool that I've never tried before, and it does say the radio is communicating. So this is just further looking like a faulty radio. So here's the radio wiring schematic. We've got one power feed here. We've got our ground here, and we've got our communication circuits. Looks like we're on multiple networks. We already know that the resistance test of CAN bus network 5 is normal. So this suggests that we have a faulty radio. We could have a faulty cable between the radio and the display, but I don't think it's showing us our IPC, our cluster display. But still, if that were true, if it was a cable issue with the LVDS, why would these modules be setting communication fault codes? They wouldn't. So most likely it's not a cable issue. I'm still thinking it's a radio fault. And it's looking like if it's got power and ground continuous and the communication circuits are normal, I should go try and communicate with the radio via the scan tool. And if I'm able to successfully communicate with the scan tool, the only thing really left is the radio. And I can't get it to wake up. I can't get it to respond. So it's not like I can do a radio programming or software update or anything like that. I mean, maybe I can try to force program it via SPS. Let me first attempt to communicate with it via the scan tool. Radio identification information. So the radio is displaying a part number when I attempt to communicate with it, so maybe I'll try to do an SPS program, because it looks like the radio brains are blanked out. The radio's got corrupted software. I won't be able to do a USB programming because the radio won't actually wake up or respond so that I can press the buttons and say, yeah, I want you to continue on and do USB. So I'll do an SPS. I'll attempt to do the SPS programming and see if I can recover it that way. If not, I'm probably going to just replace the radio. All right, some more good news is that SPS has retrieved calibration part numbers from the radio, so that further implies that the radio is able to communicate and the network is intact. We've got some special instructions here. So I need to follow these instructions, continue on with the programming if it'll let me, and we may get lucky and be able to save this radio rather than replace it. Yeah, it's trying to do something, but watch. Checkline Connect is an absolute nightmare, disaster program, and it's probably going to fail. It's probably going to lock up and freeze. Oh look, not responding. Programming event failed. Yep, Checkline Connect has just been an absolute disaster ever since they released it and forced it upon us all. Pulled calibrations again, nothing's changed. Okay, same instructions. The power mode is off like we're supposed to be. See, it says right there we want power mode off. Let's see what it does. Looks like we got a little further this time. Okay, confirm that we are power mode off. Is it going to get through the programming? Ooh, look at that. It's communicating. It's transferring data. Well, spoke too soon. Yeah, there may be nothing I can do for this radio. It's doing something, and then it just fails. So we may just have a faulty radio. It's all locked up. That it said retrying and failed, but then all of a sudden the radio screen there came alive. So I think we've made some sort of progress. Not responding, Techline Connect, good old Techline Connect. But we at least did something because now I've got a display on the radio. So I've actually decided to go back to this bulletin that I found earlier because now that I've got that screen up, so back to our bulletin, it says logic lock, possible low voltage or a failed update. It says there could be 3 conditions. It looks like we've got an update failed message. If you have an update failed message, start at section 2. So section 2 is if function has returned, perform a battery test. So they want to know that the battery is in good shape, but they also say, well, you should do this USB update and you should add the battery ignore file so that the USB update will force its way through. And then it looks like they want you to install the USB update drive and leave the vehicle off for 20 minutes. And it's supposed to fix itself. So I guess I'm just going to continue on with this bulletin like I was trying to do earlier. Now that I've made a little bit of progress, we'll see what happens. Instructions say to use the USB-C, but I don't have one because that's what it's like to work at a dealership in America. But it looks like the USB-A software update file it's doing something now. Look at that. We've made some sort of progress. Technology, right? Okay, the USB programming just finished its little status bar. It says it's in recovery mode. It does look like the bulletin did apply after all because it says disconnect the battery for 15 minutes. You're going to reconnect. Where's the page? Recheck function. If the screen is black, start at section 1. If the screen is showing update failed, start at section 2. So section 1, they wanted you to attempt to do an SPS programming with a VCI. I did the SPS programming without a VCI and it failed, but it did get us to our update failed screen. We made some progress doing the USB update, but now we're in recovery mode. So now what do I do? Okay, so it says wait 15 to 20 minutes, radio will start recovering. Some vehicles may not be able to turn the ignition on or off as long as the message display. May be necessary to repeat this process until it completes. So do I need to repeat this process a few more times? Do I need to program via SPS? What do I need to do now? Says if the radio displays calibrate device after USB update has completed, A11 radio needs to be reprogrammed via SPS2. And it says also if the vehicle has not been resolved or there are codes now perform published diagnostics. It says perform SPS setup. So I may need to do an SPS programming and then an SPS setup. Okay, we're going to try to do the SPS programming now. Hopefully it does not fail again and loop us right back to where we were. This is the actual speed that everything progresses in. Still showing that we have a difference in part numbers. Looks like we're making a little more progress this time. Watch, it's going to go back to normal as soon as it finishes. I'm just predicting. Hear that? That's an old 90s Chevy pickup. You never see those anymore. That's an old 5.7 liter 350, Chevy small block. Well, it did something. I left the USB drive in there. I probably shouldn't have, but we'll see. So it did at least complete, and it was successful. Can I power it up now? Look at that. We're all back to life. So looks like this was a frozen computer, a logic locked radio, and we followed the diagnostic instructions and that bulletin, and that was the saving grace that saved me from putting the radio in it. If only that bulletin had come up the first time that I searched for that code, the U0 or the U164E code. If that had been linked into the bulletin, it would have come right up and I would have just found it right away. But whatever, that's just how it goes sometimes. Can I power it up, or is it broken? It's awake, but it's not doing anything. I don't know, maybe I don't know how to operate it. There we go. Okay. It is working. Yep. Well, looks like the radio is working now. So that's all it really was a logic lock. And so I did submit service information feedback on that bulletin. I said, hey, maybe you could add the U164E code to that bulletin so that it shows up when people search it. So looks like that's probably all I got for this one. And this is a known issue because we had a bulletin. And from what I'm gathering, these radios, I think it's the IVD or IV, whatever RPO code it is. Seems like these have had a few updates out now. So another thing is that if we had followed U164E all the way through, if you would have followed this diagnostic document, you would have eventually been told to replace the radio, because the circuits would have tested fine. Power, ground, and communication circuits are testing okay. So they would have told you replace the radio, and it would have fixed it, but it would have cost somebody a lot of money for no reason, because there was not actually a physical problem with the radio. It was the fact that it is logic lock, software problem. Well, before I reassemble, I decided, well, let me take a look at the scope pattern again and see if there's any difference, or if we can just determine what is normal or not. This is what we're sitting at 0, which I believe beforehand I questioned it because it was like floating, but then that went away. So let me step on the brake. Everything just came alive. Let me start it up. So as you can see, we're now in a normal state, and let me pause that. Looks like we're still getting about the same voltage range, but am I not seeing? Actually, I do. See, I see the highs and lows, so I'm going to assume that this is normal, because now everything's functioning normally. So we can assume that this is what a normal CAN bus 5 looks like. Don't know why we've got some modules that are toggling outside of their normal range, or if that's just some static. That's like some overshot from the transistors turning on and off. That's kind of what it looks like. But so apparently that's normal. Now we know. Another one down. Thanks for watching.